Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. Welcome back to Voices of Resilience. My name is Nathan Hofer, and I am with the Lost and Found Association. So if you don't know who Lost and Found is, and you're just here because of our awesome guest, Nicole Kelly, who I will introduce, and well, I'll probably let her introduce herself in force here in just a moment. But we are an organization, we're a local organization based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We are focused on preventative mental health care, on building resilience in young adults as a form of suicide prevention. We want to live in a world where no young adult considers self-harm or suicide as an option. And we believe that the work we do, combined with the work of all these other partners and people, many of these people that you've seen on Voices of Resilience here, if you haven't seen them, go back and look. There's some good ones. But many of these people have really invested in that space as well. And so we're super grateful, and like I said, we believe that resilience and preventative mental health are important parts of making people strong enough to handle those things that life throws at you, because we know life has thrown a lot of curveballs at us all in 2020, and that's all I'll say about that. So like I said, we get to work with so many awesome people, and one of those awesome people is right here with me today. We have Nicole Kelly. Nicole, welcome.
Hello, it's so nice to be with you for this day to finally be here. We've been planning for this day for
like what, September, August?
I think so. I think that's when we first touched base with each other. So it's really exciting to finally, fully be here and to be able to hang out with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited, and like I said, I've been really looking forward to this. I know our conversation is going to be great, and like I said, I've just been counting down the days almost, because I think you are going to offer just an incredible perspective. You're connected to us fairly locally. You are a former Iowa resident. It's probably a little more. I mean, there's a lot of South Dakota, Iowa jokes. We'll just leave it be. I will say the one thing I can say
that. I was like, maybe don't go there.
The one thing I can say is that I think recently the construction by Sioux City ended. I was like, this is a miracle. I can drive. I was like, I don't even know what to do now if I don't have construction to wait in. I don't want to go.
Yeah, that's fair. My sister spent many years living on the border next door to you guys. So we'd always hop over and visit South Dakota every time I'd go to see her. So I'm a regular visitor.
Well, that's fair. That's better than we can ask most of the time. So I'll take it. So Nicole, well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Yeah. So again, my name is Nicole Kelly, and I think that the kind of significant point where my story kind of tracks and that people always go back to and kind of start my introduction from is the fact that I was Miss Iowa in 2013, so I competed at Miss America, and that I am one of a very small number of people who have competed with a physical disability at the Miss America stage. And that was really significant for me, as I'm certain we'll dig into further. But from that space, I learned how important it was to be a voice specifically within the disability community. So in coming out of my time of being Miss Iowa all of those years ago, I've continued to speak and advocate and be really, really invested in the disability community. So I've spoken at schools and universities all over the country. I speak at corporations very often on the topic of disability. And I'm constantly just like kind of Tetrising fun, weird projects in, like, oh, we need somebody to edit a book that has a limb different character. Yes, let's go ahead and do it. Or, whatever it may be, I'm kind of constantly really passionately working on disability projects. But kind of to step back before that, yes, I was born and raised in Iowa, and from a really, really tiny town in Iowa. Keokuk is the name. It's the very southeastern tip. So about actually as far from South Dakota as you can get. Like, you literally have to drive 6 hours across the state.
I get it.
But I grew up in this little bubble of a community that really knew me and nurtured me, and gave me the grounds to really kind of become confident in who I was and try a lot of things before I then entered into the quote unquote real world, where I was kind of having to learn what my disability meant when I was encountering strangers or just society as a whole. So that's kind of the nutshell version of who I am and what I do these days.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, I just want to say for anyone watching, I see we have some live viewers here. If you have any comments, any questions you have for Nicole, I say this every week. You all have to hear me talk every week, and I'm sure you get tired of it. I have to live with it. I mean, deal with that. But if you have questions, we want to hear them. So toss them in the comments. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, toss them in the comments. We'll get them right here. We can pull them up on screen, and we'll bring you into the conversation. So with that in mind, Nicole, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your story? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit here, but what led to you, you mentioned you're growing up in a small town of Iowa. Like, what was that like? Because I know you've mentioned to me and probably to many others about your Miss America experiences having almost an inciting incident occurred in that space. So I don't want to take your story, so I'll just leave it at that. If you can share a little bit about your story that led you to where you are now.
Totally. So, I mean, like all things, life is complicated, right? And there's a lot of layers to unpack and kind of understand. So try to go along with me on this journey, understanding that I'm kind of giving you the basics, but there's so much to unpack as we could talk about each kind of individual section for hours. But yeah, because I grew up in this tiny rural hometown. I just turned 30 this year, so I was born before the internet existed. And because of that, my parents were in this very rural space with no access to any kind of connection into any kind of disability world, right? The information that was given to them was very little. Doctors didn't know why or what happened to me or what that meant. Kind of the closest thing to anything disability community that I got to was my parents were very good to take me to Shriners hospitals. And throughout my life, I always had the option of having a prosthetic and did always have a prosthetic. Whether I was using it or not is a whole other conversation. However, the word disability not only was never used to describe me or was talked about in my household. In fact, it was a step further. It was actually talked about in a negative form. That is not what you are. And in fact, disability is something that means something very negative, and that is not what you are. This form of conversation and this kind of community upbringing is now what we call ableism, right? It really is teaching somebody who is like me that I have to try to work extra hard to be quote unquote normal. It's not okay if I need to ask for help. I mean, of course, it's okay if I need to ask for help, but always the goal is to try to assimilate as much as possible into the quote unquote normal culture. And when you are every single day encountering, I'm going to school and maybe I need a little extra help learning how to cut, but I haven't been really taught how to advocate for myself, or the fact that because I just have one hand and need to learn how to cut differently, that it's okay to pause, slow down, and advocate for myself in that space, ask for help, right? Instead, it's kind of the opposite messaging of, you are no different. You are no different. You are no different. You are no different, over and over and over and over again. And that messaging happened to be quite detrimental in my life. Because what I found out when I flew the coop and actually went away to college, I went to the University of Nebraska. So again, very close to South Dakota. Have a lot of friends because of that from South Dakota.
Yeah. Husker, my grandma, my family's from Nebraska. My sweet 94-year-old grandma gets only real cranky once a week, usually when there's a Husker
usually
game
when
on,
it's the Huskers, yep.
And it's been painful, of course, lately. So she's been a little more edgy.
A little more on the edge. Yeah, no,
anyways,
I hear you. I fully became a part of the Husker culture, right? But what I learned, I mean, part of the reason why I chose going to that school is because I wanted to go somewhere where, for me, it was a blank slate, where I didn't know anyone, where I could kind of really start my own dream away from home. And so I arrived on campus as an 18-year-old who never really truly had to explain or advocate who I was and what I was, because I grew up in this tiny bubble where the same people I went to kindergarten with, I graduated high school with. Everybody knew me, and there's a part of that that's really good, right? A part of that is that I wasn't having to continually explain myself, and people knew kind of when to step in and help me. And those kinds of things were really good. But at the same time, I suddenly found myself in a college space feeling extremely alone and not understanding that with now every single person I was encountering was a stranger. And with every single person, one of the starting conversations I was going to have with them, whether I liked it or not, was the fact that I had a physical difference, and my physical disability was something we would have to verbally discuss. And that was really, really overwhelming to enter into a space where I felt like that's all that I did my entire first semester of college was try ways to like coolly talk about having a limb difference. And then like, I'd be like, oh, that way really didn't work. I made that really awkward. I should try something different next time. But I was like an 18-year-old really trying to figure this out. Anyhow, so made it through college. College was great. Got my degree in directing and theater management, where I went to New York. Surprise, this is our connection. This is where we actually met each other, not in South Dakota or Nebraska, in New York City. Who would have thought?
Who knew? Like we just discovered, we were just talking, because of Nicole, I am 3 degrees separated from Kevin Bacon now. So this is my thing here. But yeah, who knew? Small world, right? But it had to be spread as far apart as we could.
Right? And we had to go to the middle of 8 million people to meet. However, I went there, and what I was doing, because my undergraduate degree was directing and theater management, I found myself backstage, we're interning and then working on Broadway shows, which in theory it was my dream, but it wasn't my dream, because there was no space for me to have a voice or for someone like me to be on stage. Zero. It wasn't there. It wasn't an opportunity. So weirdly, because I saw and understood that opportunity wasn't there, I don't think I realized it at the time, but subconsciously, I somehow figured out that pageants could be a space where I was literally auditioning for the role of being myself. All I had to do was step on stage, interview, explain who I was, what I was. I knew I could do that with confidence. I knew I liked talking. I got to sing a song on stage, which always made me nervous, but I loved. And I got to audition to be myself. So I actually left New York City to go to compete at Miss Iowa. And again, I'm living in this space where I don't use the word disability. I am not associating with the word disability. I think the word is very bad. But at the same time, there's this itch of me understanding that I don't have a real place in the world, right? There's this cognitive dissonance that's happening in real time. I in theory know that in New York City is where I want to be, but at the same time, I'm finding that even when I'm there, there's an itch for something more that I can't have. That's not there for me. So I won Miss Iowa, which was very exciting for about 12 hours. And then this is where we finally get to this inciting incident that you were talking about. What ended up happening was my name and face blew up in not only in the national news, but actually in the world news. And the world news was that an inspiring disabled girl was going to Miss America. And suddenly the entire world was using this term that I had been told was bad to describe me. And I cannot express to you how confusing and how lonely that felt, because my entire life, the people that I loved the most taught me that word wasn't what I was. And yet here the entire world was telling me that's what I was. Who do I believe? What does that mean? How do you make any sense of that? And this was a time that was really, really difficult and hard for me. This was a time where I experienced a lot of anxiety and depression. This is where I experienced legitimate PTSD after I left the Miss America stage. And I lived in the space of mental health not being okay for quite a long time. But what I needed to do at that time was really take the journey to understand that word disability. And I knew that even though I was scared of it, I needed to do it. So what I started to do from there is I started to read a ton of books about the disability community. I started to seek out mentors within the disability community and ask questions. Who are the people doing the work? Who even are those people? I don't know. Nobody taught me. Started to seek those people out. I started to find all the organizations who are doing things and trying to create real change. And what I slowly learned bit by bit was that the disability community was an incredible community that's fighting for their rights, who are people just like me, who have lived their life just like me, and who still don't quite fully have an equitable life, right? I should be somebody who can move to New York City and audition right alongside all of my friends that I went to college with to be in shows. But that's not an opportunity that I have. That is not equitable for me, right? That is a very real life example of me living in a space where I am fully part of this community that is the disability community, and there's still a lot of gaps to fill. So now I'm proudly on the side of, yes, I live with disability. And in fact, the moment that I really embraced the disability community, my life made so much more sense. And suddenly I understood what I was fighting for. I understood what that cognitive dissonance was that I had been feeling my whole kind of awkward early 20 adulthood that nobody had ever taught me before. So that was a lot. I talked for way too long. Sorry.
No, golly, no. That's why you're here.
Cheers.
Cheers. No, I know there's some questions that naturally preclude what you just shared, but I wanted to back up a little bit because you said two things that really stood out to me, and I'll address them one at a time. But first was you talked about ableism, and I know that when that growing up too, we had people. I grew up in a small town, so a little smaller than I think your community, based on our conversation.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you think I feel like people think they're doing the right thing by trying to empower people, by trying to say like, hey, you aren't different. Or like, I think about it on terms of, not just disabilities, but, different backgrounds, racial backgrounds, things, whatever that might be. Like, it's like I don't see color. You're the same as everyone else. Like you're no different. And on the surface, that does seem like there was, like you were saying, it sounds like you have a great family and they love you dearly and they wanted you to feel empowered.
They're the best. Yeah, they're the best.
But I mean, what do you say? Because I feel like from myself, I feel like that's been what's been almost taught to us. And growing up, I've learned as I've gotten older that that's obviously not the case. That recognizing differences does not have to be a bad thing. It can be a thing of empowerment and saying like, you and I are different, and that's awesome. And here's why. But But I mean, what do you say to people? Because like I said, I feel like that's how many people are taught. It's like, nope, we don't see them as different. We see that as they're just like you said, just like us.
The problem with that is that's completely denying the experience of the person. My experience has not at all been the same as a person who has two hands. That is the reality of my life, right? And so trying to tell me that I'm the same as you is in fact quite insulting, because what that means is you are discounting the time in 7th grade when I was playing basketball and a referee blew his whistle because my shoe was untied. So I had to very quickly pause to tie my shoes, but yet the other team of girls who didn't think I was able to tie my shoes whispered in excitement because they were watching me, a 7th grader, tie my shoes. You are discounting the moments in my life that were not fair, that were not equitable, that were not the same. And in fact, what people should be doing is listening to the voices of those who are saying, you know what, there are some gaps that need to be filled. And you need to follow my voice to understand what that gap is, because there's no way that you have lived or walked in my shoes, and that's not a bad thing either. However, you need to trust and understand the fact that I cannot take off the fact that I have one hand. I never get to put that aside. I live in this body every single day of my life. So you need to trust and understand that the experiences that I share with you, that when I'm telling you something isn't equitable, when I'm telling you something isn't fair, you really need to trust the fact that that is what my lived experience is. It's really about having empathy for that person and pausing to say, oh, wait, I guess I don't know what it's like to live in your body.
Yeah, I think, and thank you for saying that, because I I think it's important to hear, because I also think it's important to just, to take that time to say, understand someone's experience and know that it's not the same as yours. And, when you're saying, I appreciate that phrase, that you can't, I can't go home and take that hat off of, I mean, this is a terrible example, so please forgive me. But I know I was kind of a klutz, in high school, and I broke my hand twice, and being in a cast for like, 3 months at a time, like that was tough when I
Yeah.
had like that, trying to do things, and that was a season, and it wasn't the same, because I could still use my hands somewhat, but it was like, and so that's my bare understanding of it, and it's nothing. It doesn't even pass the surface of that, of what you have to deal with. And another thing I thought of that I wanted to say again, because you said it and it was so that it hit me, what you shared, is that you felt that you had to, for Miss Iowa, to audition to be yourself. How difficult is that? I mean, I can't even imagine what that's like, that you felt like that was the first time you could actually be yourself. I just, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a couple times now, about what our call was going to be like, and I wasn't prepared for that. I was not prepared for that phrase. So what did that, I mean, what did that do to you, for you? Like, was that experience to audition for yourself? I assume it was both stressful and empowering.
Yeah. So again, I don't think, I mean, I think a lot of this has been kind of post emotional homework and me understanding really why I was making the choices that I was making in real time. The most that in real time I could have said to you was like, I love working in New York City. My family on Broadway is here. And yet I still feel like this isn't my space. Like I still feel like none of this belongs to me. And 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 I want to be on stage. I want to be on stage. Where is a place that I can be on stage? No, really, where is that place? And so I think subconsciously, I had a few people that I knew that had done pageants, but truthfully, honestly, the world was completely foreign to me. I technically, you have to do what's called a local in order to like win your ticket to compete at the state level. And like I look back at that time and like technically I was wearing the wrong dress. I was wearing, at the time, Miss America still had swimsuit. I was wearing the wrong swimsuit to walk on stage. I technically was, I didn't know what I was doing, is what I'm getting at. However, what I did know, what I knew with real true confidence, was the fact that I loved to talk. I wanted to be on stage, and I knew that I wanted to be on stage more than the other girls around me. Because if those other girls around me really wanted to go be on stage somewhere else, they could, and I couldn't. I didn't have that option. So to me, that was the only option and the only space. So I think I just wanted it that much more, to be honest. And a lot was on the line for me. I saw that as, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
as my space to be on stage.
Yeah, well, that's powerful. It's a powerful series of things that you went through, and like you said, it's I think to my own small things in life, the things that I've had takes me 10 years or 8 years, 9 years, 10 years to process, and it's like,
Yeah.
things that I was like, that happened when I was in my, like you said, mid to early 20s, that I'm just processing now in my 30s. I'm like, oh wait, hey,
Wait a second.
hold on a sec,
Yeah. Yep.
So, you also mentioned the disability community, and I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on that, because I think that what you said, I don't know if we glossed over it too fast or something, but it was, you said that it made everything made sense then, and it sounds like you had just this incredible layer of support, and you also mentioned, struggling with your mental health and well-being at that time too. So how did that community shape you, support you? How did you build that community as well? I mean, it sounds like, if you moved around a lot to find that community. How do you find that? How did you build that?
Yeah, I mean, community became so important. And I think what was hard about the journey was that, because I was fighting against what my preconceived and taught notions were, that stigma against that word disability. It took me a long time to lean into that and to be okay with, oh, maybe this is a group that has an identity that I share, right? It took me a really, really long time to cross into that threshold, which is just such internalized ableism. Like, just the stigma there is just, it hurts my heart to look at it now, because I just know that's the answer. Like, that community was the answer, but I tried to stay away from them, I felt like, for so long. But yes, community was everything. So once I finally was like, okay, let's actually jump into this. What does this mean? It came in lots of various forms. It came from having conversations specifically within, there's a pretty heavy following of people who know each other specifically because we have one hand. So who were my peers within that specific group who really were trying to have conversation and trying to read books and trying to learn more? Like, who was trying to say more than just like, I'm pretty and have one hand, hello, thanks, on Instagram, right? Because there's a lot of those people who need to invest further. What is that further, right? And we've just been taught none of it. So it's not any of our fault that that's what we think, but like, where is the more? Where is the community in that, right? So anyway, sorry, that's a little off sidetrack, but really seeking out those people who really, really were also kind of digging for that more. And then it just became me finding excuses to plug into communities specifically. So my home base is here in Chicago, is where I'm located at. So the disability community all over the nation runs what are called independent living centers. And these are really flagship centers for people who are looking to do disability work. Like, at these independent living centers, they're all a little bit different, but I'll speak to what's in Chicago. It's specifically called Access Living Independent Living Center here in Chicago. They have a team of lawyers who are ready to help if there's any kinds of like disability claims that need to go through. They're doing grassroots work with communities all around Chicago to fight for different access and equity here. They have a whole policy department that's working with local and state politicians who are actually working to create equity within the laws that are being passed. Like, I could go on and on and on, but these are people who, and also all of the people who work there identify as having a disability, right? So the people who are working towards equity and disability it's run by people who have disabilities. So I remember walking in the door for the first time and being like, oh my God, I'm at home. Like, all of these people have some form of disability and are talking to me about like, in this specific community, we're actually fighting for X, Y, and Z because, something isn't specifically fair for the disability community. Like, how fun of a conversation was that? That was actual action that I wanted to take. And then also the other I would love to mention here in Chicago, there's an actual class that they run called ADA 25. And it is every year they put together a whole group of people who identify with having disabilities. And in this class, we learn our disability history. We learn all about different disability policies. We learn about different disability models. And at the end of it, they seat you on a local Chicago board. So everybody gets placed on a board. And the whole idea is that we're putting the disability identity into seats of power, which is amazing. So I just found these people who were just talking this language that made so much sense to me, and who were fighting the good fights. And that actually got me excited. I want to do the work along with them, right?
I love that. And I think that's so cool what was happening with that ADA 25 you were saying, because that's where you can, and not that you can't affect change from other places, but being in a space where you can affect change and like that's so incredible to have that kind of support and driver to get people whose voices need to be heard in the places they need to be. I think that is awesome. Absolutely awesome.
It's amazing.
I think that is, yes, very cool. That's I wish everywhere did that. I wish we had something like that all over the place.
It's the first of its kind, and we're hoping, I mean, everybody, I feel like anytime I talk to anybody else who went through the program, we're like, when is it moving to new cities? But it's
Yeah.
fairly new in Chicago. It's really, really well supported and beloved here in Chicago. They have a ton of amazing partners, and yeah, just the empowerment and also the intention. If you want to change the city of Chicago, you know, you can do that either internally or externally, right? You can externally being we're out protesting, we're out fighting the, you know, like using our voice to say this is bad, but internally means we're in positions of power at making actual decisions that make change. So the whole idea is that we're being placed in these positions to internally make awesome change within the city of Chicago. It's pretty awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
And something you mentioned before too, that I think I don't know if it really ties back directly, but it's something that you said that just, it popped up to me as you mentioned stigma. We talk about stigma with mental health a lot on this channel. But obviously that can be, I think those stigma can be tied back. I think the stigma probably around a disability can lead to some, mental health issues and things like that. You've kind of insinuated that too, but we can touch on that in a moment. The thought I had though was I've seen you specifically really using your social media platform to really work to destigmatize that. So this is more of an advice question. So what can people do? Because I mean gosh, how long have we been connected? Not like probably 2013, 14 maybe.
Maybe
Ish.
while I was in New York,
Whenever that was,
2012, probably
12.
12. Yeah.
Wow, weird.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's actually, that sounds right.
That's a
Crazy.
long time.
I don't like those numbers.
I
Math,
know.
that math doesn't add up.
That math feels wrong.
But with that in mind, I was thinking, like, how do you use your social media as a place of creating change and not, like you said, you mentioned the phrase of like, look, I have a disability and I'm pretty, and that's what you, but like I've seen you use yours as like a ground for change. You've had some things that have challenged me that I've been like, oh, you stop. like so I would love to hear what your advice is, because I think social media, especially now in the midst of a global pandemic, this is our space. This is where we interact. I don't always love it because we've talked about the negatives of social media multiple times, but there's so many positives as well. And so I'd love to hear how you have found success in using that space.
Yes to everything you just said. Social media is such a double-edged sword. So I think first what I'll say is I think for my mental health, I realized as I started on the journey of realizing that I had people following me on social media, I had to make a switch in my brain that social media to me really was a space of business. It wasn't personal Nikki. And in fact, I got to keep personal Nikki to myself. And that was really important, right? I business Nikki talks about disability a lot, but also, she talks about other things, but there are a lot of other things going on in my life. I have a lot of other identities that I love. I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a nerd for musical theater. Like there are all these other identities that I really also invest in as well. However, what I realized was that specifically my disability identity, the good that came out of social media is the fact that disability stories have been told incorrectly for forever. When the news media tells our story or when movies are telling our stories, they really like to categorize our stories in really stigmatized ways. Either we are looked at as so inspiring, right? Like I was when I went to Miss America. Wow, we can't believe it. It's just so inspiring. This poor little girl is just so lucky she gets to do this, right? Very othered in that way. That's one way we get talked about. Another way is that the storyline is all about overcoming the disability, meaning, so let's say somebody gets into a car accident and now suddenly has to live their life from a wheelchair. A lot of society wants to tell the story, well, like they're magically going to learn how to walk again. Just give them time. Instead of empowering it's great to live your life from a wheelchair. And in fact, that's a really, really great way to do it. And aren't we lucky to have the tools that exist for people to be able to do that, right? And then lastly, to kind of use our our actual body or differences in body to create some sort of villain, right? To use it as a prop in that way. And so because these narratives have been used and are really old, and they're old, and I say old in the sense of like tired, because that's not true. That's not my story. I'm none of those things. I'm not inspiring because I get up and go to the grocery store in the morning, right? Like that does not make me inspiring. That is not my story. So I don't resonate with those stories. Those stories, I do not see myself when I look at those narratives. So that was my really long-winded way of getting to specifically social media. For the first time ever, I get to control my narrative. I get to tell you what my life is like. I get to educate you on perhaps things that have happened in my life that aren't equitable or fair. I get to educate you on the ways that my life is different, and that it's okay that my life is different, right? It really can be a tool, if used correctly, to educate and bring awareness. And that is what I try to do with it. Although, again, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, you take the good and the bad, but like I said, I've seen you use it for incredible good. And as you mentioned, I think probably as I start talking, you'll know exactly where I'm taking this, because well, it'll be pretty clear. But as you were talking about the different tropes that people cast people with disabilities in, you mentioned the last one, the one where it's a disability is seen as a thing that is a negative, and it's seen as a way. And I know that you mentioned you and your community are in the midst of something right now that when you shared it with me, I hadn't even seen it. I didn't really look, and now because of our conversation, I was able to go take a look at this thing you're gonna share about and be like, oh yeah,
oh yeah.
oh yeah, like, and honestly, it wouldn't have popped in my head had you not shared that that perception, because it just, like you said, it's something that you've seen time and again, so you just kind of went over my head. But when you shared it, now I can't unsee it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things. So can you share a little bit about what you and your community are dealing with?
Yeah, totally. So what is very big news right now in our community, and in fact is picking up some national news attention. So if you keep your eye on the news, you might see my name and picture in a couple of articles here coming out soon. I've had some interviews over the past couple of days. What has happened is that Warner Brothers has released the remake of the film The Witches. However, they have made the hands of these witches look exactly like limb differences of hundreds of kids that I know. And to kind of quickly try to explain it to you without seeing the pictures, is they sort of have 3 fingers at the end of their hand. And they're using this kind of 3-finger look as a prop to be very scary. And in fact, if you watch the movie, the shots that they're using, they're really focusing in on the hands as something that are specifically bad, and they're framing them as such. They're something that need to be defeated. They're very bad. And like I said, I know hundreds of kids who have hands that look exactly like this, not even like kind of, like exactly like this. So it's incredibly disheartening, because now we're watching kids in our community who are staying home from school because they go to school and now they're being called a witch. I mean, like, it's very real. The implications are happening right now, and it just does so much damage. And this storyline that they did not give any proper thought to now is really damaging a whole group of kids. And Warner Brothers released a pretty poor statement just saying, well, we had a production team and we didn't think we were offending anyone, and sorry, we made these decisions, essentially. But they really, I mean, the honest truth is they just didn't think about it. They didn't think about it, and they didn't think that people in the world had this variation of a hand. And that was a huge mistake on their part. And now it's, again, our community that's going to have to pay the consequences for what that does, because all that does is generate stigma in our society. More stigma for us, more. That's bad and evil and ugly, and that's definitely steps in the wrong direction.
It breaks my heart to hear about kids getting picked on in school like that, because it's that is something that can be incredibly painful. for getting picked on for anything, but something that you have no control over, that is just part of who you are. And oh, hey, look, we have a comment here from my friend Tom. He said he recently started work for a disability services organization, and he's thankful for this learning opportunity. So
yay!
Tom's a good egg. Fun sidebar. Once again, I like to do that, but Tom and I used to be, we used to hang out in college together, and I am a whopping 5'6" tall, and Tom is 6'8.5". So I would get lost easily in the midst of people, but if they knew I was by Tom, they could locate
Tom,
me. So
where's Tom?
my parents had that happen. At a football game, standing by Tom, maybe have Tom stand up. Stop. Yeah. Anyways, that's neither here nor there, but that's just a fun story.
Tom, you played an important role in his life.
Still does. Tom is a good person, and he is always supportive of building a better tomorrow. Everything, Tom. I'm gonna stop talking about you in a sec, but he's worked for the last 8-9 years with a bunch of nonprofits, just trying to make the world a better place. So we're lucky to have you in here, buddy. I'm glad
Thank you, Tom. Yeah.
Glad you're listening. I will probably I'll toss your contact info in as well, because I think it'd be great for in a little bit. I'll put it up on the screen because I think it'll be great for a lot of folks to get connected with you, especially with these things that are happening. But back to what we were talking about with the stigma, especially as we're talking about young adults, children, things like that. It seems like that stigma is an easy entry point into a lifetime of maybe mental health issues, because they're being bullied, picked on, self-image is distorted. So what have you seen in that area? And has that, obviously I don't think that was the same experience you had, because you had a pretty supportive community, even if it was maybe taught you the wrong things initially. But what do you see with these kids that you're working with? Like, how can others empower them and build a space where they feel safe, where they feel loved, where they feel like they belong?
I mean, I think it starts, where does it start? It's such a big problem. I mean, I think in general, we just need to be making our spaces, and for kids, that would be school spaces, much more inclusive, which is not something I don't think is the norm just yet, right? Like, why can't we yet normalize having interpreters in school, or having closed captions for kids who maybe are old enough to read along and need help reading along, or maybe have some respite spaces for kids to go to if they're of the mind or emotion where they need just like a breakaway. Why can't we normalize those? Because those to me are access needs. Those are not those are not something that we should have any problem asking for. I think we're lucky that the school has the IEP system, and that I think there's some good supports there. However, I think many of the supports are kind of separated out and maybe a little bit othered. And so it would be great to just see more of the actual inclusion happening, and the quote unquote normalizing of these kind of extra access needs. This isn't a deviation from normal. This is just the way that Charlie does this, right?
Oh gosh, I had a question, and now I just popped right out of my head. Oh no, I remember. So what can we be doing to support the disability community? What can we be doing as people to advocate well for the needs of this community that, like you said, has been largely, I want to say not attended to, but I feel like that might be the right phrase. It feels like I would say, ignored. That's probably the word. Largely ignored community. So what can we be doing to support and empower?
So we are the last group to actually have a civil, no, I'm not in quotes. I was going to put it in quotes, but it's not in quotes. We're the last group to have a civil rights movement. So, it was women's rights into civil rights, into LGBTQ, into now disability rights. So really we are in a place in history where disability is really next to go through some really kind of landmark changes, and to really get the attention that we deserve. We're not there yet. We get forgotten a ton. People talk about the word diversity and they don't even think about the word disability going in there. However, you cannot leave us out. You can't leave us out. And we are ingrained in the midst of these other communities in which you're talking about, right? There's all this intersectionality happening. So you can't leave us out. So I think, I mean, truthfully and honestly, I think the first step is just to start educating yourself and to start reading about our community and understanding our history, because while I do make it my job to quite literally do that for people, it really shouldn't be my job to educate others, right? Like it should be your homework to do that. And I think then also to start following the voices, seeking out and following the voices of leadership who are doing good work, who you admire, and really following what they are saying should be done, right? Because it's our voices who should be leading the charge as to changes that need to happen and what needs to go forward. But also, I mean, so much of, you know, I'm coming specifically from I have a physical disability, right? Like when I walk into a room, my disability leads, but, you know, so much of your community here, that's talking about invisible disability. And that comes with a whole extra other layer of feeling like you have to prove that you're disabled enough when you can't physically show, oh, I have one hand, right? It comes with all of these other extra set and other layers of things. So I think also it's starting to kind of understand that, again, everything's like layers and onions, but understanding that within the disability community ourselves, there are kind of these different layers of access needs or ways in which we experience the disability or we experience the world around us. I hope that made sense.
Sure did. What can you, as we're kind of getting close to winding up here, what kind of resources can you give people to connect with, with groups that need assistance, how can we get more educated about what's going on with people with disabilities? What can we do to be supporting that? I know you kind of touched on that already, but you know, what are some things that we can do to educate ourselves?
Yeah, totally. So if you're looking for a good podcast, I run a podcast with my friend Sarah, and the whole entire point of our podcast, it's called Disarming Disability, is we pull in different specific experts from various fields within the disability community to have a conversation with them and specifically educate around whatever topic they happen to be an expert in, right? And so we've had all kinds of conversations with, you know, professors who teach disability studies, to people who are on the front line of doing, you know, protests, and to people who are changing policy. Like, we really have collected a cool group of people. So I would encourage people to listen there and check out that website. Also on our website, we have a tab there that is called What We're Reading. And there's a whole list of books there for you as well. And those books are a great place to start to actually read about what disability history is, or to understand who our disability leaders are. As far as kind of the big names to be following right now, one of the quote unquote mothers of disability, she's still alive and still doing a ton of work. So I would encourage people to look up Judy Heumann is her name, and she's still doing amazing work all over the place. I also would encourage people to watch the movie Crip Camp on Netflix, because that movie tells amazing pieces of disability history, and they have amazing footage from all of these different things that were happening during disability history. It's currently up for a lot of awards, is expected to be up for more coming soon. It's so well done. I can't say enough about it. And I think if you kind of start plugging yourself into those readings and those listenings, you'll start to kind of hook into, okay, who are the voices and the people and the organizations, because those are the things that are kind of being talked about or read about or watched as you're watching a movie, you know, within those pieces of content.
Awesome. And I pulled up your website on the banner here, but also I posted it in the chat, so anyone who's watching, you can just click on in the comments and go right to disarmingdisability.com. And Nicole, as we kind of wrap up here, anyone who's watched this at least, you know, twice might know that I always like to try to end on a note of positivity. So what are some things that give you hope and optimism as we move into 2021? Just
Man, oh, what a question. I don't know. It's hard to see through that cloud right now, isn't it?
2020 still has like 2 whole months left, so I'm not.
My hope and optimism, you know what? I really do love and really believe in the next generation coming up. I think that they are a lot more woke, and I think they're a lot more tuned in to these social issues that we're discussing. So I think they kind of are inherently starting to learn what we never got to learn. And I think the changes really, really will come with them because it just is being woven into kind of their culture of growing up, which is so important. So I think I see a lot of good coming from that, and a lot of amazing. The other piece I would say is just like in talking about disability in general, it's much too white. So also I feel a lot of hope for the amazing leaders and in the disability world who really cross into different intersections, who really are being listened to and followed now. I think that is so important. So those are the two things.
Awesome. I love it. And if you all want to get connected with Nicole, I put it in the comments as well, but I'll toss it up here. You can connect with her on social media at Nicole G. Kelly. You're going to see a theme here. If you want to get connected with her on her website, it's missnicolegkelly.com. And if you want to get a hold of her by email, missnicolegkelly@gmail.com. So also, if you're looking for things, we heard a lot of awesome stuff from you today, Nicole. Emphasizing experience and community and just all these things. But if you're someone who is struggling and you want to get connected, whether it's with mental health or just finding a place, or you want to get connected with Nicole or someone else and you don't want to contact her directly, which is silly because she's really great and really nice, so you should contact her. But feel free to reach out to us at Resilient Today on Facebook and Instagram. Also, you can put a .org on the end, and that'll take you to our website, but probably remove the @ symbol. That won't work. Tried it. I tried it because I thought that would be a cool thing to say, and it didn't work. So feel free to connect with us there. And then lastly, as I forgot to start the show with, because I should know how to do it by now, but I just don't. I forget. I want to thank our sponsors, the Astrup Family Foundation, American Bank and Trust, for supporting Lost and Found, the work we do, but also Voices of Resilience. And Nicole, I said Nikki, oopsie. That's
okay.
That's what you're saying.
OG.
I know, but it's
yeah.
Stop it. Don't do it.
Nah, I love it. It's fine.
I was doing so well in my head every time, like, don't do it, because I still have you saved to my phone as Nikki Kelly, and I got to change that. That's my bad.
That's all right. Nicole is my branding and marketing for professional Nikki. Remember, we talked about that.
Yes. Well, Nicole, I'm so thankful you were here with us today, and we're very blessed to have your wisdom and experience to be a part of this, and I learned a ton today. I hope everyone else did as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be back next Thursday, everyone. And like I said, connect with Nicole if you so desire. I recommend it highly. She's great. And hopefully we'll reconnect with you again, Nicole. So we'll see you all Thursday. And thanks again, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you.